Saren. Nihilus. This isn't your mission, Saren. What are you doing here?
The Council thought you could use some help on this one.
I wasn't expecting to find the Geth here. The situation's bad.
Don't worry. I've got it under control.
Saren Arterius, who is the main antagonist in the first game. He's quite an iconic bad guy. Basically, we're introduced to Saren in the first game, also in the first book, Mass Effect Revelations, which is a prequel book, also written by Drew Karpyshyn, who writes the first two Mass Effect games, or one of the lead writers on there. Basically, he's a Turian Spectre, and we're introduced to him right away in Mission 1 on Eden Prime as he's shooting another Turian Spectre, Nihilus, in the back, thus betraying both his species, the Council, and Shepard right from the start. Just to say, before we do get into any lore, there's obviously some spoiler alerts for anyone that hasn't played the games yet. And as I said, just to let you know, some of this will be our own speculation, but we'll try and make it clear which part is speculation and which part is actual canon. Yep, so do you want to start with a description?
Yep, sure. So, we'll be using basically what is established canon, and then plus a few levels of our own, inferences on what he might be and what his motivations might be, as there are some things that are left sort of unanswered. So I guess we'll get straight into it. Official records of the Spectres are all sealed, but it is known that Saren followed Turian tradition and entered the military at the age of 15. In 2155, he was promoted to active service after only a year of training, although it is unclear whether his unit was involved in any of the battles against human forces during the First Contact War of 2157, but we sort of assume that they were. In 2159, he became the youngest Turian ever accepted into the Spectres. Intelligent, cunning, and capable, Saren quickly developed a reputation for ruthless efficiency, although there were a number of unsettling rumors concerning his brutal methods, and there was no denying that these methods did gain results. In recent years, Saren has become a very outspoken opponent of human expansion. Like many other non-humans, he believes the System Alliance has become overly aggressive in its efforts to establish the people of Earth as a dominant species in Citadel space. Historically, species took centuries to accomplish what humanity had achieved in less than one. And there are several species that have lower standing on the Citadel compared to humanity already, despite having been a part of the Citadel community for much longer. His speciesism is speculated to have originated in the First Contact War, where Turians attacked Shaanxi, and in 2165, Anita Goyle, the first human ambassador to the Council, informs David Anderson that Saren lost a brother in the war, and has disliked humanity ever since. After their abortive mission together, Saren and Anderson retain a mutual dislike for each other for the rest of the series. Saren has very little disregard for life. He does not see saving lives as a priority unless the Council deems it necessary for him, or if there is information to be gathered that he requires. He remains the Council's top agent despite his records. Saren may be ruthless and calculating, but he gets these results, so of course the Council are going to sort of side with him as they, if they put him on a mission, they'll get what they want. He follows two major principles, the first being never kill anyone without a good reason, and the second being you can always find a reason to kill someone. So those two principles definitely work hand in hand there.
Yeah.
So next I'll let you talk about Saren in the Mass Effect Evolution comic.
Yep, so this one did come out a little bit later on, but it is a prequel to kind of explain some of his backstory, and the backstory of others as well. So basically, it's immediately after the First Contact War in 2157 CE. Saren is charged of human prisoners Jack Harper and Eva Kor, Dr. Eva Kor. He starts to return them to Arcturus Station, which obviously is a human station. When upon bringing them to the station, Eva tackles his brother Decius. Saren pulls Eva off of him and then joins Decius aboard the ship and departs the station. Later, when Jack and Eva come looking for the artifact that they found on Shaanxi, Saren ambushes them with several of Decius' bodyguards before Eva and Jack escape. While running through the corridors, one of the guards catches Jack and Ava, and it's their old companion Ben Hislop, who also is his last name is used as a cover for the corporation that kind of the Elusive Man builds Cerberus up through in the novels, which is like, I think it was Hislop. Was it Hislop Aeronautics or something like that? So while Eva is pleading with Ben to let Jack go, Saren arrives and orders Ben to release Jack and to seize Eva. Eva tries to get away up a ladder, but is brought crashing to the ground by Ben. While Ben is combing through the wreckage, he comes across Eva's unconscious body and has a moment of clarity. Saren, however, quickly shatters it by ordering him to bring Eva to the ship immediately. Once back on the Turian homeworld of Paladin, Saren approaches his brother in a temple to say that Decilus's servants, dressed as Veluvian priests, won't move the artifact into the temple, even after he ordered them in that language that Decelus dug up. Saren continues by saying that they were willing to appear with Decelus and wear the cloaks, but they won't go the last kilometre they need them to. After Decelus has a short conversation with one of them, telling them they will move the artifact once the colonnade is clear. Saren says he doesn't like it, and they don't serve him, and they only care about the monolith. However, Decelus is confident that he can use the monolith to control them effectively, as well as use it to perfectly replicate the circumstances that enhanced Harper's abilities without reducing him to a mindless husk. It is Decilus's plan to use the monolith to evolve the Turian race to the next stage, which Saren dubs Meta-Turians, so that they would be able to put their race at the top of the galactic dominance. So I guess the rest of the story is a little bit of essentially Saren and his brother Decelus having a conflict. Decelus kind of going into a bit of madness in terms of trying to create these Meta-Turians. And it basically results with Saren having to destroy the temple, leaving his brother Decelus and his bodyguard still inside, thus assuming the death of Decelus, and then basically vows to avenge his brother, blaming, I guess, other things on that. So yeah, look, before we get onto the next appearance of Saren, like what were your thoughts on that kind of origin story, if you like?
Yeah, I guess it's like an interesting start into like the mind of Saren. Looking at his original sort of setup before any Reaper influence and stuff like that, which we'll get to later. And just seeing how he's, I guess, influenced by his want from Decelus to, I guess, advance the Turians primarily, and sort of focusing on Turian supremacy as like his major sort of his major focus. I guess it's really interesting, especially when you get to the start of Mass Effect 1, when the first thing he does is, I suppose, betray another Turian spectre. It's quite a big sort of thing for him. So I'm definitely it'll be interesting to see what else we get to in this video as well.
Yeah, and look, and again, just before we move on, so Jack Harper, as we have like come to know through these stories, is the original name of the Elusive Man, who, as we know by Mass Effect 3, seems to be also indoctrinated by the Reapers, and seems to be working on the guise of promoting humanity, but using Reaper technology. So it probably goes without saying, but the monolith must be some kind of Reaper like artifact that they use to indoctrinate people, and it looks like they've both been affected, both gone on their own sort of paths of, pushing or trying to push their own species highest, but still basically doing the bidding of the Reapers. So it's just interesting that this is obviously how this particular one worked. That maybe it's this divide and conquer thing where the Reapers basically, instead of having all the species come together, it's almost like pushing them apart. Yeah, and in the case of the Elusive Man, or actually in the case of Saren as well, it really helped them eventually start their invasion, because without the work of Saren, for example, like Sovereign wouldn't have been able to start what he did in Mass Effect 1, and in the same vein, like without the Elusive Man doing all the things he did, eventually helping the Reapers, putting their tech inside of people and stuff like that, it would have made it a lot more difficult for them to launch their invasion. So I guess, yeah, it is sort of a divide and conquer where they almost get like enemies inside our lines to start their invasion before they've even shown up, essentially. Yeah, absolutely. So, alright, moving on to the next appearance of Saren, and the book that came out literally immediately before the very first game came out. It probably wouldn't have had that many people reading it at the time, but probably after the game came out, more people went back to read it. I actually only just read it this week, and it's the origin story of the relationship that Anderson and Saren have. Obviously in the game, if you ask the right questions to Anderson, you can find out more about that from him. But essentially it's the story of how, Anderson was getting, judged by or evaluated by Saren to potentially join the Spectres as the first human Spectre, and Saren basically just ruined the operation and then blamed it on Anderson, and that never happened for him. So basically the long and short of it is it focuses on the two main characters, Carly Sanders and David Anderson, but there is some stuff from Saren's point of view as well. So long and short of it is he investigates a kind of a dealing that leads him to basically investigate some Batarians who he thinks might be connected to this human research facility called Sidon that was attacked, and they think that was an inside job, that the Alliance were trying to investigate it and hide stuff. Basically it was very, very dodgy, and we find out essentially that the Alliance had been researching AI illegally. At this point, it was illegal in council space to do that. So long story short, Saren and Anderson sort of cross paths before Saren knows that it was about AI, and they try and keep it from him. There's a really interesting meeting. Basically Carly's on the run from both the Alliance and these mercs that are basically behind these Terran mercs that are behind the attack on Sidon, who are trying to kill her to stop her from obviously telling the story of what happened. But they kind of all end up at this facility, more or less, that basically where Saren's trying to get to this Batarian called Hadar, and who's also working with a human called Dr. Shu Qian, who was researching the artifact that they discovered with Carly. But basically, long story short, on this facility, the council tell Saren that he has to work with Anderson and evaluate Anderson for this Spectre thing. Anderson, in the meantime, has developed feelings for Carly Sanders, who had been, captured by a Krogan merc that's working for Hadar, and is being kept captive, if you like, so they can work out what she's actually told people. Basically, so Anderson then says to Saren, I don't like you, I don't like your methods, I pretty much know what you're going to do. Let me go in 30 minutes before you. Let me just get Kylie out first, and then you do what you need to do in terms of your operation. Basically knowing that Saren's going to destroy the whole thing. Saren does destroy the whole place, basically sets an explosion to create a distraction. Kylie and Anderson just about make it out. In the meantime, Saren had, caught up with both Hadar and Dr. Shukian in the same room, and got some info from them before killing them both, in cold blood. And then the epilogue is that Saren then goes to find this artifact, which we're led to believe is not just an artifact, but it's actually sovereign. So this all takes place about 17 or 18 years before the events of Mass Effect 1. So that's really the kind of the story in short. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Again, pretty interesting how we get to see Saren in action in some of these missions, not just hearing about it and seeing it in Mass Effect 1, but actually seeing how he's just ruthless with his objective. He doesn't care about anybody's life, not even the fact that he's supposed to be sort of evaluating Anderson. He finds out about the artifact, and that becomes his primary goal, despite the fact that he's a Spectre. He's just interested in the artifact by the end. So
there's an amazing scene where he's torturing a Batarian merc to get info on the guy that hired him when he's on that path as well. And it's there's a really, really amazing interaction with Saren where he basically he's pretty much not evil. I wouldn't say evil, but he kind of is. He's I have to do this to get the result. So he's already that way inclined. And obviously, as we kind of come to know, the artifact is sovereign. And we now know from obviously the Evolution comic that before that he had been exposed to this monolith. So there's a really good chance that he's sort of already under the early thralls of indoctrination anyway, without it being so deep at this point. But a lot of what he does might have been, affected by that. So I think it's kind of interesting to kind of show The fact that like maybe it's not just himself, like it's not him like in control completely.
Yeah. Well, and even if he's in control, there's definitely some sort of push from the indoctrination to, I guess, continue searching out these artifacts to slowly keep exposing himself to Reaper technology and stuff that will slowly and eventually confirm that he will be indoctrinated, no matter what. Yeah,
so the way it's sort of, I guess, explained, and this is a little bit of speculation and a little bit of the explanation, is that it's this kind of creeping itch at the base of your skull, like at the back of your spine, that it sort of just, I guess, drives you a little bit and makes you kind of want to explore, and you kind of become a little bit obsessed, not wanting to do much else, and then it obviously, ramps up from there. But it's unclear how the indoctrination theory works, and we might do a lore video on indoctrination theory at least, in the future. But I mean, I think that it's quite interesting knowing this now, that it's, from Mass Effect, obviously the game, you think that he kind of just goes crazy throughout the game because it kind of shows it that way, but actually there's a good chance that he already was.
Yeah, definitely. It's super interesting for sure.
So speaking of his appearance in Mass Effect, do you want to...
Yeah, so I'll go on and take us through his appearance in Mass Effect, which I guess is sort of his major appearance in the game series for the most part. So after he acquired the artifact, Saren's activity were pretty mysterious. Not many people knew what he was up to. The only report coming from this time was from Adnot Rex, who was hired along with several other mercenaries to attack freighters, including a Volus cargo freighter. While Rex was looking for valuables, he saw Saren walking through the ship, ignoring the mercenaries who spoke to him. Rex did not know why Saren chose to attack the freighter, and there was nothing particularly valuable on board, at least as far as he was aware, but the Krogan had a bad feeling about the job and left without getting paid. And his instincts were validated, as every other mercenary who had been involved was found dead within a week. It is still unknown why Saren attacked the freighter, or if he ever found what he was looking for. So during this time, Saren makes his final preparations to recover Dr. Xu Jian's artifact and encounter Sovereign. Presumably, from the Revelation novel, he sort of already had contact with Sovereign, but here he's fully encountered it, and through the Ancient Reaper he learns the fate of many civilizations of eons past. Instead of using Sovereign as a weapon as he had originally intended, Saren makes it his goal to save the races of the galaxy by aiding the Reapers, proving the worth of organics to Reapers so that they might be spared. He believes that servitude is the most logical answer, instead of instinctively fighting to the finish and obviously being completely removed from the universe, which is what he thought the Reapers had planned. However, Sovereign has other plans, and the more time Saren spends in service to Sovereign, the more he is indoctrinated. So his free will is gradually being sapped away and being supplanted by the desires of the Reaper, and the values of his people that Saren still believes in, that an individual personal needs are always subordinate to the greater good of the group, are twisted so gradually that Saren remains certain that he is in the right, but slowly Saren becomes Sovereign's most powerful and visible agent. Able to begin the plan Sovereign had been laying for centuries while the Reaper kept its true nature hidden. Saren acts as Sovereign's agent on the forefront, never revealing the true enemy. So everybody sort of saw Saren as the enemy, and they had no idea that he was actually working for a much greater threat at this point. The Geth are sought out from behind the Perseus Veil to serve Sovereign, looking upon the massive ship as their new machine god, and Saren as their prophet. Matriarch Venezia allies herself with Saren in an attempt to make him follow a better path, but ends up becoming indoctrinated herself as well. And then she becomes Saren's most powerful ally. Saren commits horrific crimes against citizens of the galaxy, killing those he had sworn to protect, using people for his private experiments, and even murdering his old friend and fellow Spectre, Nihilus Kriik, when a Prothean beacon is unearthed on the human colony of Eden Prime. Saren leads the Geth there to use the beacon and find clues that will lead him to the conduit, as the message sent through the beacon was coded so only organic minds could understand it.
Saren's attempt to destroy the Eden Prime colony to cover his tracks failed when the Alliance ship, the Normandy, responds more quickly than Saren would have anticipated. Obviously, this is where Commander Shepard's story in the trilogy begins. So he leads a ground team to secure the beacon, only to learn that Saren and the Geth are behind the attack on the colony. Later, Saren is informed that Shepard made contact with the beacon as well, and then decides that he has to eliminate the threat of the commander. So after initial reports to the council of Saren's rogue activities, they don't want to obviously believe that straight away. And during a hearing, Saren can deny all of this using his history with Anderson to kind of, I guess, further alleviate guilt from himself. So the council sort of believe that and follow that, at least for now. So they say that in light of like no evidence, so I guess the next part of your story as Shepard is to explore the Citadel and basically gathering evidence. You also basically here recruit three new squad mates all in one go, which is pretty kind of awesome, in Rex, Garrus and Tally. But this is not about Shepard, this is about Saren. So Saren, it turns out that Saren had basically I guess bribed one of the Shadow Agent's contacts, Shadow Broker's contacts by the name of Fist, to basically betray the Shadow Broker and then give Saren Tally, because she basically has an audio recording of him and Benezia, basically that incriminates them. And of course, the story goes that Shepard saves her from being, I guess, handed over to Saren's agents, and therefore the council then make Shepard a Spectre. So that's kind of the setup. What I'm going to do is say what happens in the rest of the game. There's a certain element of some choices that come up depending on how you play as Shepard as well. So in terms of lore, like there's a couple of options here, but essentially. Essentially, once the council have got the evidence on Saren, they revoke his Spectre status, and they then say, you know, Shepard, you need to go after him. So he's still accompanied by Matriarch Benezia, who's trying to kind of get him back onto the right path, but is being indoctrinated herself, as mentioned before. But Saren's continuing his hunt for something called the Conduit, whilst building up a bit of an army. So the next time you really come across him, like, properly, would be like all the way, I guess, until Vermeer. But before that, a couple of the missions you have with Shepard kind of give some insight into what he's doing. One of which is something called a Thorian, which we will do a video on separately at some point. And a Thorian is like a plant life that uses, I guess, indoctrination as well to get people and things under its thrall. So you basically have a choice as Shepard there, whether you destroy the Thorian or keep it, but either way, the next step after that is going to Noveria, where you kind of find out that he's also dealing with the Rachni, and trying to, you know, work on basically using the Rachni Queen's genetic knowledge to get the Mu Relay's location, which will help you get somewhere. From there, you basically work out, or Liara works out, that means that the next step is on Ilos as well. So I guess the big one is Vermeer, and then what happens there. Obviously in the story of Shepard, it's a pretty sad part, the first time you really come across having to sacrifice someone. But from Saren's perspective, he was rebuilding like a Krogan breeding facility. I guess it was clones. So that's part of what he was trying to do. And there's also a part in the lab that's trying to study the effects of indoctrination. So he's obviously aware of it, and he's obviously trying to counteract Sovereign's indoctrination attempts.
Yeah, so obviously, I think it's at this point, if you're really reading into it, Saren is not an idiot. Like, he's not being indoctrinated completely, sort of, like, unawares. He knows what's going on to some degree. He's just a little bit, he's underprepared. Like, there's not much you can do when you're, you know, it's a human being versus, like, an almost perfect, well, not a human being, a Turian, like a human level being. Trying to combat a Reaper's influence. It's definitely pretty impressive that he even lasted this long with like a pretty decent amount of his own free thought still intact. And I think it's sort of because of this that some of the choices you can make with your Paragon or Renegade dialogue options with Saren later in the game that make a lot of sense. So, you know, if Saren was completely indoctrinated, or if he was a complete idiot and didn't even know that he was being indoctrinated, you wouldn't be able to convince him to stop, basically. But during the game you are able to sort of shake Saren out of his, I guess, control from Sovereign. Granted, yeah, again, this is only because Saren himself has such a strong mind and knows that he is under the control anyways. There's just nothing he can really do about it until Shepard is able to kind of, I guess, talk him out of it. So, do we want to go to sort of what happens at the end of the game?
Yeah, we will. Just before we do that, I mean, obviously Vermeer is also home to, I guess, one of the coolest sort of twists/revelations. I think in a lot of games, actually, is the obviously up until this point we knew that Sovereign was an awesome dreadnought ship, but the belief was that it was kind of a Geth creation and it was like a ship we've never seen. And obviously Vermeer is where Sovereign essentially reveals himself to be an actual Reaper, which was pretty awesome kind of reveal, and it kind of makes you realize that, okay, Saren isn't actually the big bad, like the big bad here is Sovereign. So that was kind of a cool, like, I guess, interaction that you can have as Shepard and Sovereign. And yeah, like going on to the end, obviously there's like a bit of a battle. You get to the Citadel, where it turns out the Citadel was a massive relay that Sovereign's trying to activate to help the Reapers, I guess, get into into the Milky Way from dark space more quickly. And obviously Shepard comes in and puts a bit of a stop to that. So there's a way that you can, if you have the right, as mentioned by Sindri, if you have the right paragon and all the rest of it, you can sort of talk Saren into, I guess he ends up shooting himself and stopping himself. Unfortunately, after that, Sovereign, basically with implants, then I guess assumes direct control. Not that that's said yet, but turns, like, you know, Saren into the earliest kind of Reaper Turian that we've ever seen, which come back in Game 3. And there's, you know, just for a boss fight sake, I guess, but, you know, the point is that it was too late for Saren. Saren's not Saren anymore, and it's this idea of, even though he's not human, is like completely losing his humanity, I guess. So that's really like the Saren story. There's a bit of trivia for you. So there's a character called Avitus Rix, who's a character in Andromeda, again in our minds spin-off, but in Andromeda, who was a spectre, and it was actually Saren who appointed Avitus Rix as a spectre. And then also, according to the art of Mass Effect, Saren's left arm is actually a grafted Geth arm, which is kind of interesting. I mean, you definitely see that towards the end of the game.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool, because it could also just be that the developers needed, like, the model from the Geth arm just to put on Saren, but I still think it's pretty cool that if, like, in lore, he just, you know, grafted a Geth arm onto himself with the help of a bit of Reaper tech. That's pretty cool as well. Like, either way, like, it's definitely super interesting to see, especially by the end of the game, when Saren really, really does not look very biological anymore. Like, he's very much sort of cyber enhanced. Like, you even see like the gaps in his like Turian like mandibles, I guess, with like the metal teeth underneath and stuff like that. It's really cool. Yeah,
super cool. So on that as well, he also has cybernetic ports visible in the back of his head. They're not like noticeable in obviously the hologram during the meeting of the council, but you do see them like at other parts of the game. And interestingly enough, there's a platform that he rides on, particularly in the Vermeer encounter. So it was originally intended to be used by Geth troopers, but it was made only for Saren later on. Again, I suspect this is probably developer terms, like because of, you know, development issues. But like, I guess the law reason is that the Geth didn't need them. And the platform that he rides on actually has a Geth like flashlight eye style as well. And is probably controlled by one of his implants.
Yep, some early concept art for Saren also portrayed him in a completely different outfit that was sort of black and sleek, as well as wielding a sword or a cane, intending to tie into his biotic powers. So see sort of the Art of Mass Effect books. This was later changed to make Saren more of an armored military figure. But I think you can definitely see some of the influence there. You know, the way they originally intended Saren. Yeah. But I'm definitely happy with the way they ended up sort of
agreed.
making.
Very iconic. So the voice actor was a guy called Fred Tatasciore, who's like a prolific video game voice actor. been in way more than you would have thought, but he's also worked with Bioware in a lot of other games like Dragon Age Origins and Jade Empire. He also voiced, even in this series, he voices Balak, the Batarian, who is trying to, I guess, make asteroid X-57 blow up Terra Nova. Comes back in Mass Effect 3, and also Warden Kuril, who is, I think, the Turian warden of the Purgatory prison, where Jack's being held in Mass Effect 2. This is where we really go into more speculation and more of our kind of thoughts and theories. For me, in terms of like voice acting, like I always, I guess, thought of him. He always reminded me of like the guy that voices Scar from The Lion King. It's a guy called Jeremy Irons. He always reminded me of him, and I always thought if they ever did a live action, like he would be the perfect actor for Saren. He just has that kind of drawl, you know, that like evil British like villain drawl. I thought that would be perfect for him.
Yeah, I think his voice is definitely like perfect, especially as you sort of, you know, from the start, even when we see him on the hologram during the Citadel meeting. You sort of, you as the audience, like not even Shepard, is sort of, you can feel yourself getting annoyed just because he's sort of drawling. He has it all planned out. He knows exactly what to say to confirm that like the Citadel and everyone else like won't sort of betray him here. So it's super like it's super well done. I think the way he's definitely like charismatic enough to convince them. So yeah, definitely.
So I think when we talked about this earlier as well, but with all the appearances, even before this game, so in Evolution and Revelation, it kind of suggests that indoctrination may have been happening right from the get-go, like from that monolith. And then we talked about it again, but we know that Jack Harper's actually Elusive Man, and both of them went in their own directions in terms of, you know, I guess speciesism and supremacy, I guess, but also ended up essentially aiding the cause of the Reapers. So I guess this is a bigger question. First of all, is like, are Saren and the Elusive Man really bad guys? Because I mean, maybe they're not, or maybe they can. It's like hypnotism. Like you can only be indoctrinated if you're already a little bit that way inclined, if that makes sense. But either way, like it gives a cool new dimension to the fact that like Saren and the Elusive Man are kind of like two sides of the same coin almost, really.
Yeah, that is sort of what they become, and I do love how Saren sort of starts off the trilogy and the Elusive Man kind of ends it off. So it's kind of, you know, those two characters are definitely super important for the entire story. And they sort of both had a start in a similar place, but ended up going in two different directions. Really cool.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, again, you get this kind of, I guess, semi-redemption of Saren in the sense that once he, like, in a moment of a bit more lucidity and having his own conscious mind, he chooses to kill himself rather than do anything that would then bring about the end. So he kind of regains himself and puts a stop to it, or at least he thinks he's putting a stop to it. Obviously, little does he know the Reapers are too powerful, at this point, and you can't stop them, I guess. But it was kind of a nice little redemption moment, possibly.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the perfect ending for him as a character, that he sort of again, like he was aware enough to know that indoctrination was taking its effect, but he didn't realize how far along it was already. And that's nothing, like, that's not his own fault really. That's just the fact that the Reapers are just that immensely powerful. But yeah, as Shepard sort of is able to convince him just for a brief moment to sort of take a different route and not follow what the Reapers want, he sort of at least redeems himself, despite the fact that he's already got like the full-on like Reaper tech skeleton that Sovereign just revives and uses to continue the plan. But still, I think Saren's probably my favorite character of the series, so it's really nice that he gets his sort of at least his redemption at the end.
100%. All right, and that's all we know of Saren at this point, other than potential, I guess, some other small theories that result in possibly there still being members of his family alive, because the temple with his brother in it did like get destroyed. Like, you never saw the body, so obviously, as we know in fiction, unless you see the body, Like, and even if you do, sometimes in Shepard's case, you know, you never actually know. So who knows if there's more works in the Mass Effect universe? Maybe there are still ways that Saren's legacy can go on.
Yep, so with that, thank you for watching. If you have anything to sort of add about Saren in the comments, let us know. And if you have any questions, of course, let us know again, and we'll hopefully be able to answer them. But thank you for watching.
There's still one way to stop this. If you've got the guts.